So again, I wanted to thank you all for coming here today. And my name is Rob DeCoe. I'm the executive producer at Lux Virtual. You would think that running a creative studio, I have a creative background, but I actually come from the education field. So I have my master's in education. I was planning on teaching business and marketing, K through 12. And then, I graduated in 2008 like a lot of us, and there wasn't really a lot of those teaching positions. So I ended up going back and getting my MBA and a master's in leadership, so way overeducated. But that got me a position working in the college. So we started some programs working inside a correctional facility. And that was where I first got involved with coding and graphics. One of my fellow teachers was using coding in gaming and VR world. So I was like, oh, using that, like, you've heard the analogy of like, if you're a bricklayer, it's like, are you just laying bricks, or are you building a building or a cathedral? And if you show people or others like what you're building, like you have that passion linked to it. And so fast forward, I ended up moving down here about 5 years ago now, and got married. And I started this company with my business partner at that time, Nick, who was our creative director. So we started as an animation studio, and then we quickly morphed into doing video production, animation, and then Nick's passion was that VR world, which was what brought us into virtual reality and our first large project with Metropolitan Water District. We've done other VR projects. We did one highlighting the fitness industry, so we had a new fitness product coming out, so we did a virtual workout. We did one for a large-scale waste incinerator, so the industrial side, and then we did one mock-up for the airport that we're looking at, so just going in so you could see around the airport in a VR environment. So we have a little bit of background, but this is our first big VR build. So I'll go to the slides real quick. So virtual reality and visuals, an effective educational tool. I wanted to focus on 3 things today. From an education background, being a teacher, you always want to give people takeaways. So the 3 primary takeaways about effectively using visuals and why we use them. So to draw a crowd and attention, to persuade or inform an audience, or to promote a cause or institution. And so the whole time today that I'm talking, I'm going to be coming back to these 3 points. So they're at the end, they're in the beginning. So the big question with visuals, like if you're using anything from like a logo, video, animation, still prints, what is your purpose for it? And one of the things, recently I've gone through the National Science Foundation program, so mentoring some students through, and one of the things they keep plugging in is that product market fit. So with your businesses or anything that you're doing, why are you doing the visual? Is it going to propel your brand or what you're doing? Is it the right price point? Like if you only have a limited customer base and then you're spending this huge amount of money on this promotional thing and you don't have the capacity to build it, it's probably not a good product market fit. So before you're doing anything with visuals, kind of asking yourself, like walking through the scenario of where do you want it to go with it? And especially in the education environment like you guys, like if you're going to expose the students to this, a lot of it's just getting access to the content, and then how much does the equipment use that can funnel them through it. So the price point might not be that high because it's not like you're creating individual content, where some places might want to create that individual content, which is where the incredible price tag comes up. So just kind of keeping in mind, like, what is my goal using visuals, and who's my audience, and how do I find that right product market fit? And this is actually a slide my old business partner put up. We're still on good terms. We split about a year and a half ago, so he still does projects with us. Great guy. But he talked a lot about how stories engage the heart and visuals engage the mind, and visual stories are made to stick. So when I'm going to go through some samples of projects we've done, and I'm going to talk to you about why they stick, why we went about them the certain way we did, and some learning lessons for me, because I come from an academic background, so not the creative side, so I've learned so much about creative the last 5 years, so I'm just trying to quickly get some of that knowledge transferred to you so that you can use some of that information in your own business or own things that you're doing. So stories engage the heart, visuals engage the brain, and visual stories are made to stick. And if you put a brain on any visual that you put on, the crowd actually rates you higher and thinks that you're smarter. So just if you ever have a visual and you're throwing that, make sure you put a brain on the screen.
Light bulb or something.
Yeah, light bulbs and brains. The end.
All right.
So that was the presentation. That's what we're doing. So now we're going to come back to those 3 points again. So takeaways. Do you guys have any other takeaways? Why would you guys use visuals in your companies? Like, have you guys done logo designs, any website restructures? What are some things that you've used visuals for?
I'll tell you what's needed. It needs to be an interface between websites and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's what needs to happen.
Well, let me go through some videos and talk about some lessons learned, and then we continue. Because no, that's actually a perfect lead into why this stuff's important. And as business leaders, like, why do we use visuals, and why would we spend the money on these campaigns and these marketing dollars? And then what's the best avenue to go down to do that? So I'm going to start with our video that we made a few years ago, just talking about why we started our company. So this was our vision for what we do. So for this, some lesson learned. It was a beautiful video. My business partner did it. His brother's a great pianist. We created this video, and then we got out there, and our niche was we were going to target these new technologies coming out of universities, and these scientists who have these great theories and ideas and are commercializing them, and all they need to do is have a video to get that out there. And if I knew then what I knew now, I would have said, me and my business partner had the skill sets. I could make the connections, he could do the visuals. We didn't have the market, and the market didn't understand what we were trying to do. So we spent years trying to educate these universities and the different government agencies on what we're doing, and it literally took us about a year and a half before we got our first client, like major client, and then it was 3 years before we started taking off, and so the learning curve on that I didn't know before, but I know now what I would have done. It's a great video, but I would have made this a lot further along in the process of where we were at. But I think it still instills the vision for where we wanted to go with it. The next one, and this goes to your branding. Branding question, and like getting that, like, people don't care about the name, they don't care about the visuals, they just care about the price. So this one, just a simple logo revamp. So it's you can see by the way it is, you can kind of look at it, you can look at some pros and cons. So it was basically a rebranding campaign for a local church, and they wanted the idea of like weaving the community into there, and you ask, like, why is branding so important? And there's a question from from an academic. I didn't get like how much money people spend on branding, how much people spend on logos, and recently I went after this branding project with a bunch of partners, and one of them had done this huge logo rollout in Boston for their bike program. And so it was the getting those bikes and the train stations and all that, and they ended up spending, I believe it was around $350,000 for just the logo, like just the image on it. And I was like, a simple logo, like you'd think like, it was like $5 to $50. They got Fiverr, and a really complex one, where you put a bunch of stuff in there, you might spend like $5,000 or $10,000. So the idea of $350,000 was so off my radar. And then I was on the phone with him talking. He's like, well, you have to understand what goes into it. And it reminded me of back when I was in college. I was on the strategic planning committee, and I remember sitting in a room, and there was like 40 executives from the school. And I remember sitting there as an undergraduate, like, these are some of the highest paid people I know, and they're sitting in a room talking about like a word here and a word there for the vision and the mission. And I was like, what a waste of money, like what a waste of time and a waste of resources. And we went through a whole year of that. And then over the next few years, I watched that campus change and double in size and hit their $50 million endowment or their growth campaign. And I was like, it wasn't about being in the room or the actual image or the change of the wording. It was about getting the buy-in for all the people in the room. And so that's what I realized with logo redesign and logo campaigns. So if you're doing like the bike one that he was doing in Boston, it's about pulling together the feeling of the community and all the different constituents and what's important to them, what's significant to them. So finding someone who, either in your group or somewhere you're reaching out to, it's like, how do I get buy-in on this, and how do I get a community around what I'm doing, or how do I tap into the people that I've had as customers for the last 30 years and get into the next generation of them, or the ones they're doing. And so it's that whole broader scope of it. And so this one is kind of that persuasion. Like they wanted, the message this particular church wanted was the weaving up in of the community and weaving in of different fabrics. And so when anyone on their staff talks about it, that's what they show. It's like, oh yeah, it's like the weaving, and so you kind of get this heart connection it's like, oh yeah, it's sticky. And the more you see it, you get that emotional attachment to the visual. And so that's what a lot of what you're going to is you want something that sticks to people and that they share. This next one, we had the opportunity to work with this group called See Political. So it was non-biased political, as non-biased as you can get. This one, we were trying to increase the vote. You guys might have heard of it. They had some articles in Culver City. But off-year elections, we have one of the lowest voter turnouts. I believe it was like 14% the cycle before. And so they put in some money to see if they could increase the voting count. And they ended up going from 14% up to 24% that cycle. So this campaign of using visuals, getting it on there, ended up being a significant increase, probably one of the contributors to the increase of the voter turnout here. So you might have seen this already.
Hey, life is full of important decisions, like coffee or tea. And on April 12th, you get to decide who runs Culver City. You can request to mail in your ballot or vote the old-fashioned way at the polls on Tuesday, April 12th. And if you want to earn some cash while helping your fellow citizens, sign up to be a poll worker. Don't forget to vote.
Very cute.
So in this one, they had the animated campaign and then they had the print campaign. So if you were driving through Culver City, they had that bird, they called it Birdie. So it was like, Birdie, get out and vote. And so it was just that anytime they were around and you'd see people around, it's like, get out the vote, get out the vote. And then one of our technical ones, we started and we really wanted to focus on technology. And so I got connected with the guys at Hyperloop One. So they came to, I was down at a government conference, I met one of their marine biologists, and then he connected us with their digital media guy, and they were like 2 to 3 weeks away from doing their propulsion test. And the guy was nervous because they had all their investors coming there, and he was like, if they just see the sled go from 0 to like 120 and then hit the sand, he's like, are they going to be pulled into it? How are they going to feel about it? So this was our quickest turnaround project. Usually an animation like this will take 8 to 12 weeks to kind of build out. But it was able to show, the story we're trying to tell was, here's the test site, and then this is what it starts as, and this is what it transforms into. So hopefully you can see that through this.
Hyperloop One doesn't require an engine. Instead, powerful electromagnets in the track catapult the vehicle to extreme speed within seconds. This high-tech propulsion system underpins Hyperloop One's vision to launch transportation into the future. Hyperloop One, be anywhere, move anything, connect everyone.
That's very cool.
And so this is a persuasion piece. It's like
Very effective.
they're starting it, and this is where they want to go, and they need additional investment. So for them, it's like they want to put the money in because it gets them to the next step along the.
That is really impressive. Very
Along
much.
And we're actually we're talking with Hyperloop One right now because they're still in this. It's now Virgin Hyperloop One. They got some investment. They're still looking at getting additional foreign investment, and they're starting the tracks in these different places. But a lot of times they'll have to pull their investors all the way here to their test site in Nevada. So we're looking at doing an immersive technology thing where we'll go in and we'll do the video shoots and put them in an immersive like VR environment, so that then when they go over there to talk about it, they can show like this is what the room would look like, this is what the current one is, and so you can go through the different phases of it. And this is one of those case scenarios where it makes sense to spend that high dollar amount to do that presentation. And the funny thing about it is like, Hyperloop One would need to spend that money, but to get access to the visuals for it, like if you wanted to show your students, once it's public release, like you can show that to people and so they can see it, but it's if you want your own personal material created, that's where a lot of the expense comes in with this. Yeah, and so this is like, these are one of our kind of like target clients that we particularly work with, and it's those ones that they have this great idea and they have a certain amount of funding and they need to go to the next round, and so these will help them get to that point. But
I
it's,
guess you have to make sure no one, like if electricity grid is stopped or something,
down.
that person's gonna be just stuck right into that
Yeah,
tunnel,
they
so they're gonna have
stop
a
them
lot
down.
of security, they're gonna have a lot of.
yeah, and a lot of exit points, like every,
Yeah,
every little
It'd be nice
bit.
if it was solar powered, right?
yeah, so,
Yeah, especially in the desert.
and then until someone figures out how to make an instant
Yeah.
eclipse or something like that. No
That
one's ever
would be a
figured
good
that out.
day.
Could you imagine someone just says, well, I'm just gonna make it dark?
Lex Luthor.
Yeah.
And then another one, so we do some like safety and training videos. So we're asked to do some training, some safety videos for Metro, and this one, like, you create this whole world of Safetyville, and basically they were having their new line coming out, and so they were afraid that people were going to either step out on the track, they're going to drive around the block. So they had their 6 most likely and highest rate of accidents that they have around new terminals. And so we created these 20 to 30 second animated videos to get out there, and they wanted them funny, slightly dark, but kind of not too dark. And so this is just a safety campaign.
It's a beautiful day in Safetyville. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, and Jack has decided to spring for coffee on his way to work. Uh-oh, Jack. Your coffee stop seems to have put you behind schedule. Uh-oh. It looks like Jack took quite a spill. Never run to catch the train. Safety begins with you.
A little bit dark. Not
A little bit
bad.
dark,
Being
yeah.
that his head fell off.
Yeah.
I remember that one.
Yeah, you do.
Let me pause this.
I guess the other thing would be having him on
Well,
his cell phone too. I guess
That's
makes
true.
sense. I'm surprised they haven't had a cell phone one yet. I'm sure they-
So I wanted to point out what was particularly compelling about that particular video. When safety videos are produced, we've all had an experience where we're in a workplace where we're forced to watch a safety video. It's the last thing we want to watch, let's
Right.
face it. I mean, you watch it and your eyes just glaze over and you don't even want to see it again. You're hoping that the thing is over with. Something like this, which was designed to be humorous, something really simple to understand, something that was, could conceivably go viral, and that's what makes this video stand out from other safety videos. It's something that you would actually want to show your friends because it's humorous. And so I'm just in love with this whole campaign because I thought it was the opposite of your typical safety
Yeah.
video.
That's a good idea.
And some lessons learned for me as from a non-creative perspective. We had this really well-known sound designer work on this, and we had a budget to do it, and so we had it on here, and it was amazing, not just the little sounds that you put in there, but at the end you'll notice that tinging and then the Metro thing. So each of the videos have that same sound signature. So anytime a video pops up, within the first second, you know what it is, and then when you hear it at the end, you're like, oh yeah, that was that. So it's that having something in your branding and in your messaging that links people to yours. So as soon as they hear it or they see it, whether it's colors, certain symbols, like, oh, that's the cruises, or that's this, that's and so you have people link to it, and you get that stickiness where people share it. And then that's a lot of what goes into the thought behind these creatives, or how do we get people to carry those ideas and those thoughts with you and share it. And so I was like, oh yeah, that, after I was listening to it, I was talking to Nick about it, and he was like, oh yeah, that's intentional the way they do that. So this next one's kind of a passion project for me. So with video production, one of the things is persuading people in terms of fundraising or campaigns that you're doing. So I I've been doing a lot of ultra endurance sports, and when I was early on, you get connected with someone and they go through cancer or something, you just wanted to do something to help. And when I was younger, I would do these campaigns where you team up with an organization, and you might raise a couple $100, or the one time we raised $3,000, and then the trip cost me $4,000, so I ended up spending my own money and then donating to it, and so you just have this little bit left. And as I've gotten older, I've realized if you can combine what you do with an organization that's already on that, and then you can get the messaging out there, it just takes it exponentially to that next level. So the last few years we've been able to do larger campaigns that have a much bigger impact. And so this is one that we did 2 years ago. It was a bike ride across we ended up doing the race across America. So this was one of my friends that passed away of brain cancer about 5 years ago now, but it was kind of her story, and I want you to kind of feel just how the stickiness of it is like. It's like, oh yeah, it kind of draws you in.
Her passion and compassion in the midst of trial, like knowing that she wasn't going to make it that much longer and choosing to trust God completely with brain cancer, and being able to daily trust in that and know that it's going to be okay. Like I just can't imagine, I can't get my head around that, and it was powerful for me, and it's an honor to share about her life and share about the way that she viewed the world and her faith. Christina was one of those people that she had such a depth of faith, and then watching her go through the cancer that she did, and watching her go through those choices, and I remember following along on her blog during her last 6 months of her life, and just being so blown away of how she was going through this incredible, difficult phase, knowing that she's, kind of going into her last days. And she was so joyful. You felt so blessed about being around someone that strong and that it was such a powerful ministry.
So this is one of those, like whether we're running businesses or nonprofits, like what are we doing and how do we reach out to an audience? And for this, like we wanted to raise funds for brain cancer. And so you'll notice, like mentioning Christina's blog, like that's one of those outbound marketing, like you can drop people in, you build an audience, you're building up your Facebook, your Instagram, all those. And so if you have an organization that already has that, you can funnel into it, and then they follow something or some event, and it can be like a gala, like a lot of people do galas, or you do like a 10K, or you can do a race like this. And I view those races or events as almost, I call it like the tip of the spear. So it's like what draws people's attention to it so that we can raise money or raise awareness for this thing over here. And it took me a while to kind of get the handle on like how to do that. And then once you team up with the organizations, and it's one of those things that's in line with your values and what you're doing, you find that great fit, and then all of a sudden it just takes off. And so this was my first one where I had success with that, where we raised over $20,000.
Much of Southern California's water supply comes from the Colorado River Aqueduct, an engineering marvel constructed and operated by the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. Water in the aqueduct travels a 242-mile journey across desert and over mountains. The Colorado River Aqueduct begins at Lake Havasu on the California-Arizona border. Lake Havasu is formed by Parker Dam, one of the world's deepest dams. Parker Dam creates up to 120 megawatts of hydropower, enough to power 90,000 homes. Metropolitan receives about half this power to pump water through the aqueduct.
So one of the things about this one, so it's a 360 YouTube fly-through, so I can actually drag the screen as we're going on the computer, or if you have this on your phone, you can, as you move it around, it'll move where you're at.
And these files tend to be very large, so it's not uncommon for if there's a lot of traffic on the local
Also
network.
located on Lake Havasu is the Whitsett
And so
But the visuals are very
intake
compelling.
pumping plant, which has 9 pumps that lift water from Lake Havasu 291 feet. Water is pulled into the plant by impellers 37 feet below the surface. It is the first of 5 pumping plants on the aqueduct. Water continues to travel over mountains, through tunnels, and across the desert via conduits, siphons, pipelines, and canals. The Colorado River Aqueduct has 63 miles of lined canal, approximately 55 feet wide at the top, 20 feet wide at the bottom, and 11 feet deep in the center. The water moves to Lake Matthews, a reservoir at the end of the Colorado River Aqueduct. Lake Matthews covers 2,750 acres and holds 59 billion gallons of water. It is part of a 5,100-acre ecological reserve that is a native habitat for many sensitive plant and animal species. The lake is also an important bird resting and feeding site, especially in winter, when ducks, double-crested cormorants, grebes, and eagles visit. From Lake Matthews, water flows by gravity to a water treatment plant, where the water is purified and tested to ensure it is safe and meets or surpasses all drinking water standards. The Weymouth Water Treatment Plant, completed in 1940, was the first treatment plant built by Metropolitan. It is one of the world's largest treatment plants, with the capacity to treat 520 million gallons per day, the equivalent of filling the Rose Bowl every 4 hours. After it is cleaned and tested, water is distributed to the diverse and growing region of Southern California, Metropolitan Service Area. Here, 19 million people spanning 6 counties benefit from this water supply and from Metropolitan's leadership and forward-looking investments for the region. The water flows to homes, schools, businesses, industries, farms, and parks, supporting a thriving $1 trillion economy.
So for those of you who haven't experienced the VR on the headsets that we have, that's exactly the same experience, but you'll get the opportunity to actually navigate and look around and really feel like you're in that 3D environment.
And one thing, I wanted to go through this one more time, now that you've seen all the videos so I can reference them. So to draw a crowd or attention. So one thing that companies do, like if you've gone to trade shows, a lot of companies will use VR because they'll have a VR headset there and it pulls people to that trade booth. But we've seen the same thing, like Ian does character art, so he'll do digital character art. So having that up and doing a caricature of you can pull similar crowds. So it's using visuals, and it doesn't have to be complex ones, but just using them to pull them in. So if you're at a trade show, or if you're at like a local event in the community, like the Westchester Art and Music Festival, but you want to pull people in. So using something to draw them in, kind of that light noise, but just finding what makes the most sense for what you're doing, and also what's consistent with your brand, because you don't want to have something that's so different that they come there for that experience, but they're not the ones that are linked with what you're doing. So to persuade and inform an audience, I think a lot of those were that, especially like the Hyperloop, like persuading, the reason they did that was persuading investors. I think it was a very effective tool for that, to promote a cause or institution. The fundraising video, I think, just getting in there. And now we have about 15 minutes. I really wanted to answer you guys' questions on anything from visuals, branding, VR, AR. I wanted to show you one AR example, and then we'll get into that. And then if you want to check out the VR headsets, so this one is the Metropolitan Water District. I was sitting on their innovation committee, and so they pull in a lot of these new technologies, which is how we got the project with them. And one of the things they do is AR. So it's this one's a holo tattoo, and this will take me just a second. So it's kind of gimmicky, but it's that draw a crowd.
What does AR mean?
So augmented reality. So you can have augmented, and what a lot of it's moving into now is like a mixed reality. So it's where you're still in this, but you're using a lot of different visuals. Now I'll turn my volume up. So this is one of those.
Rob, you want to go over in this direction here?
Yeah. And you can take a picture of it, send it to people.
Wait, how'd you do that?
So it's a temporary tattoo.
Yeah.
So there's an app on here that's linked to the tattoo, so as soon as you put it over it, it pulls that image out. So we were at one of the trade shows, and they had action figures. So they had the Hulk, Thor, and so if you put your phone or your tablet, all of a sudden Thor would jump out, he'd have his hammer, and he'd do like this 15-second routine. But they had the full stand-ups.
I worked on a project similar to that for the show Vikings, and if you go to the bus shelter where all the different Vikings are, you hold your phone up, they'll jump out and start interacting with you.
All right.
And so for me, like creating this content for particular companies and agencies, like that's pretty expensive. But to have access to it, like stuff like this, I know the Water District gets these for, I don't I think they're like 6 cents a tattoo, 6 or 11 cents. So they can order 1,000 of these and have people come in. If they wanted to do one that was linked to something they were doing, that's where the cost comes in, like the higher cost comes in. But to have access to show some of this stuff to people, the price is pretty minimal, especially in education.
If you want to get something, you go to them, or is that
What do you call it? Action tattoos?
Augmented reality tattoo.
Yeah, augmented reality tattoo. They call them holo tats.
On the internet or something, find that? Or
Yeah. So if you just go, I think on Amazon, if you just go holotats, I can put the link. If you guys leave a business card, I'll email you all the links to these videos and then email the link to the holotats.
Oh.
So a couple of things I wanted to leave you guys with. And these are just lessons learned from an entrepreneur the last 5 years being in the creative space. The biggest thing I learned actually from the National Science Foundation, as we kept going over this over and over, was finding that product market fit. So making sure, figuring out what you're selling, who your audience is, and who your potential audience is. Modeling best practices. Like a lot of times if I'm in this industry, finding like 3 or 5 companies that are doing it better than me and reaching out to them, especially if they're in a different market. Like if you're doing cruises here and finding someone on the East Coast and say like, hey, here's what I'm doing on my ad campaign, here's what I'm doing here, what are you doing that's working? So sharing a little bit about what you're doing and then asking and then trying that and just doing some, I like to try something new about once a month and just testing something and start small and then go bigger. So testing things, modeling those best practices, building up a pool of people in your industry that are a little bit further along with you, possibly in different markets, so that you can figure out that and also doing some of those campaigns that they're doing and figure out like, am I spending a lot of money on this campaign that's not going anywhere when I could be doing this other one that doesn't cost nearly as much and is going to give me a lot more back for it? Because really as business people or as entrepreneurs or anything, or if we're trying to persuade or raise funds, we just want to do what we're doing. Like you just want to sail your boat. Or it's like, I just want to do these projects. And so it's like, how do I get there as the least expensive as I can to capture that audience so that we can live our passions in that. And on that, I really want to thank everyone for coming today. It's great to have this group.
It was very informative.
Thank you for coming, everybody.
Hi, this is Rob. Thank you for watching. I'm from Lux Virtual, where we illuminate brilliant ideas. Learn more about us at luxvirtual.com.